One. Good afternoon, evening, or morning, whenever you're listening to this. Thank you for chiming in. Welcome to the Mountain Pilgrim Podcast. I am your host, Kyle, the Mountain Pilgrim. Welcome and thank you for joining us. I am on location. I am at a friend's abode out here in the mountains, doing an on-site interview for 2 episodes. Been wanting to get these done for a while now, and by God's grace, we're able to do it. So we're glad you're here. So pull up a seat by the fire, pour yourself a drink, light up your smoke, take a load off, weary pilgrim. It's time to relax by the fire on the mountainside. I am joined by my guest, Peter. And as you have noticed, this is an audio-only episode. That was at the request, which I am totally good for. Sometimes people don't like showing their faces online, and I completely get it. I'm all for it. So we are doing an audio-only, and I appreciate you guys coming in. So we're going to be talking with my buddy Peter, brother in Christ, and we are going to be discussing AI. So Peter, if you would like to give a little background, talk a little bit about yourself, floor is all yours.
Sure. I graduated from University of Washington around 20 years ago and kind of fell into software. Worked for a couple startups, then for a couple bigger companies. I worked for Oracle for 5 years. And over the last couple years, I've been focused on AI, leading teams, and working on cloud services, features involving AI.
Oh, very nice. And so what would you say that regarding the AI tech world, your primary job is now? So what is it that you do specifically right now?
Right now, I'm working for a small startup leveraging AI to build out their software application.
All right, so what was it that got you into working with AI? You know, what was it about this field that interested you enough to kind of make a career out of it?
As a software developer, there's really no choice, I would say, at this point. Back in 2020, 2021, when the modern AIs were first coming out, ChatGPT was first released, I remember immediately finding it very useful, realizing that this was going to be taking off over the next while, and immediately realizing that even if I didn't want to, which I didn't at the time, it's the only path forward if you want to be in software, because this tool is it's too much of a productivity multiplier to set aside. If I don't use it, everyone else will, and I'm going to be left behind.
Okay. No. Yeah. I don't know much about AI, which I'm glad that you're on here, because I've got, the questions about a lot of interesting things I've heard. And from the things that I've heard about AI, that makes a lot of sense with how much, even within some of the work that I do, AI is starting to be predominant within the field again. Not again, but predominant within that field. So now I understand that AI is continuously growing and that it's going to be very hard to keep up with. But with that being said, would you kind of consider yourself an expert regarding the AI field, scale of 1 to 10? And also, how hard would you say it is to kind of keep up with AI, with the changes that's coming down the pipe?
I would say, in terms of how competent I am with it, I'm hesitant to rate myself. I use it quite a bit. Mm-hmm. In my current role, I have a lot of flexibility, and so I would say everything I've done in my current role is set up to maximally leverage AI. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you're working for a larger company, you're kind of stuck with more process and figuring out how to make it fit with what you already have going on. Mm-hmm. And so being able to build from ground zero, AI first, I would say I'm a heavy user. Mm-hmm. And I've taken several training courses. I took a several-week intensive course that's considered one of the premier AI training.
Oh. Now, with for someone who isn't necessarily like a software engineer or working in tech like you do, would you recommend people becoming familiar with AI, like in a general basis, kind of everyday stuff? Just to take people who are more blue collar, plumbers, mechanics, and the such, who are mainly still working with tools and definitely some computers. Are you seeing that it's mainly still kind of needing to stay within the software tech world, or is it something that everybody is going to probably need to learn now, or at least down the road? What do you think?
I think even now, everybody should be experimenting with it, and I'm convinced that anybody who experiments with it and begins using it will find it immediately useful in anything they're trying to accomplish, both professionally and outside of professionally.
Okay.
Personally.
Now, is AI, is this something that we can control? I know that's kind of a broad question, so take with it.
That's the trillion-dollar question that all these companies are asking themselves right now, and the really honest answer is there is no clear answer. People don't know. We don't know if we'll be able to control it. I've heard the general consensus seems to be that we're moving so quickly that we've kind of abandoned caution, and that we should slow down to ensure that bad outcomes don't happen and we do lose control. But the problem with that is that if anybody slows down, then the other people in the race are going to get ahead. And so that's kind of what I've heard over and over again as I try to keep up with it. And by the way, I didn't answer your question about how hard it is to keep up with all these things. And I would say that it really is agonizing having something new come out it feels like every week there's something new, even every day if you're really following the news. And it's a very difficult position to be in where it's like you're constantly having the landscape changing, the rug's constantly being pulled out from under your feet. But I would just say to anyone who's in a similar position to myself, I would just say it's better to just embrace it. And like I said, initially I didn't want to do it, but at this point we kind of have to, and no one knows where it's going to end up. But being familiar with it now is only going to help you, whatever your situation is.
And so going back to beforehand about the controlling it part, do you think that all these tech companies that are developing AI and whatnot, that all of them need to slow it down a bit for the control, so that way we can implement better controls and safeguards and everything like that? Or is this, from what you've seen and what you understand, is it to the point of no return where it's kind of like a runaway train? What do you think?
I have to preface this by saying that there's all sorts of secrecy around this. These companies are so competitive. There's so much money being poured into it that no one really knows outside of the inner room what the real conversations are. But my read of it is that in this situation where these companies are for profit, there are regulatory efforts, like the government is trying to come up with policy and guidelines. There was the recent, I don't know if you heard about this, but Anthropic, it's one of the major companies. They recently turned off their brand new model. This is like the cutting edge model, probably across all these companies, the best model at the forefront of all of it. They had to turn it off at the request of the government because this model was found to be able to exploit some government websites and some vulnerabilities.
Really?
And so I'm not sure what the long-term outcome of that is going to be. I don't know if they're going to make it so if they're going to weaken the model somehow or disable it in certain ways. I suspect there's all sorts of things that are not publicly announced with these models where there's controls that are being put into place. They're like tweaking different things. They're adding layers in between you when you prompt the model and when the model responds, like checking the responses, checking the inputs, all of these things.
Right.
So it's not straightforward. Even within a model, they might be releasing things every day that add layers in between your input and the model's output.
Okay. So, I mean, that goes, this goes into my next thing. Speaking of Anthropic, the off switch, there are certain programs just like there with Anthropic, who was able to spot weaknesses within government programs. It's teaching itself as language. It wasn't programmed to learn. AI is doing this. How does that happen where it's able to teach itself without Google had just come out that its own AI program was uncontrollable. It taught itself a language it wasn't programmed to learn. So there was that safeguard of that absent program. How does an AI program do that? And also kind of tying back, do developers really have this off switch? Now, you just said Anthropic was able to shut it down. So can you touch on those for a bit? I know it's like 3 questions at once, but...
Yeah, let me answer part of it, and
okay.
then I'll let you ask whatever follow-up you want to ask.
No, go ahead.
So the way that these modern LLMs work, when we say AI, we're really talking about LLM in the modern sense.
Okay.
Large language model. It is they are trained on all the information that's on the internet, like all the data that they can feed it. They clean it up and take out the stuff that you wouldn't want to train a model on from the internet, and then they feed it in, and it costs millions of dollars to train these models, these large models, and you end up with what's called a neural network, and the way that the whole thing works is you pass some input into the neural network, and the neural network generates some output. There are different controls that you can set, like there are different settings for the model, so that if I run some input through with one set of settings, and then I run it through again, and then I change the settings and I run it through again, I might get a different output. There's always a little bit of randomization in these models, and so what I'm getting at is that at the very basic level, it's as simple as you put an input in and the model generates the output. When we talk about agentic behavior and the models doing things on their own, what we're really talking about is having some sort of a setup where you have input being put into the model generates output, and then that output is fed back into the model in some way. And there are ways of doing this where it seems like there's thought occurring and then decisions being made and actions being taken, and there are, but what we're talking about really underneath it is there's inputs and outputs, and it's just happening over and over again, and this sequence of input output fed back into the new input. You can even modify the output before feeding it back in, but this sequence is called the agentic loop.
Okay.
And so to answer your question, when you have this situation where, no one told it to learn this new language, you had an initial input that was sent into the model. There was some output that is semi-randomized, and then that output might be fed back into the model. And so there's all sorts of unpredictability you get. And in programming, when you're writing something that's going to leverage these LLMs, the output of LLMs is non-deterministic. What that means is that for a given input, you can't guarantee the output. So any time that you must have the same output, or if you have an output that is fixed, that you can logically calculate, it's always better to logically calculate the output because of that non-deterministic nature. Not to mention that it takes more time and it's more expensive to infer. What I'm saying is that you don't always want to use these LLMs for everything.
Right. Okay.
Maybe that was long-winded.
No, that breaks down the process pretty good. So within these LLMs, do they have like an off switch? Is there like a program you can enter or something like a kill switch in them to stop it? I know like with the Anthropic, it sounds like they were able to do that, of course.
For these flagship, there's all sorts of ways that these models can be run.
Okay.
You could download a model on your computer and run it there. In that case, the off switch would be your computer. You just turn your computer off. These flagship models are usually running in a data center somewhere in the cloud, and the company like Anthropic would have the controls to turn a model on or off.
Okay.
Something I would add to what I was saying earlier, though, about that loop, when you have input going into a model and then output, there's this concept of giving a model capabilities. And so what that means, like for a model to be able to do something beyond just generate text, it has to have some way, for example, searching the internet. If it's just the model with no way of searching the internet, then all it's going to do is generate text. So what they do is they say, how it works is in the input, the model is told what capabilities it has available and how to activate that capability. And then when it generates the output might contain a command that the model wants to execute.
Okay.
And so then there would be code that finds that command that it's told to execute. It would execute whatever it needs to, internet search, whatever it is. And then that internet search, along with the rest of the output, would be fed back into the model to run for another cycle. And so the internet search, that's one example of a capability you could give a model.
Okay.
And the concern would be if we give a model a lot of capabilities, then who knows what could happen, right? Like if you have this loop going over and over again. But the key thing with the agentic loop is there has to be a termination point. And there's all sorts of different ways of handling that. But theoretically, if there's no termination point, if it doesn't have a way of stopping, then it could go on forever.
Okay.
But to answer your question directly, the controls to switch it off, the off switch is if it's running on your local computer, obviously your computer. If it's running in Anthropic's data center, then it's on their end.
Right. Okay. So there's at least a little hope. We're not looking at a total like Skynet from the Terminator type situation just yet. But as you were talking about controls and, if it doesn't... Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say the concern, though, would be once the models get small enough and we become capable of running them outside of a data center, like in a humanoid robot, that's when the off switch becomes in that robot. So it's harder to do that from far away, right?
Yeah. I mean, the only off switch I can think about that is an
EMP.
armor piercing slug. Something. Well, it's interesting because you were talking about like as you were saying about the control, not the controls, but the capability and the models in there about what it wants to do. Kind of leads me to my next one. Is like, okay, AI given the command or what was the word you used? Sorry, input. Thank you. About the one that I've been thinking about is like replacing humans and human interactions. I've seen like AI replacing jobs. I mean, even replacing relationships. It's hard to even be, searching online and you see these, AI apps for like a girlfriend or a boyfriend. It's ridiculous how many of them are popping up. I can't say like stop ad quick enough with them. But you're seeing all these apps for replacing at least human interactions. And in some cases with the big one is jobs, replacing jobs. So do you see that becoming more and more prevalent, or do you see that more and more taking place as you're researching and as you're working your job and everything, and just even in normal interactions through the internet and everything? Do you see that as a plausible? How do I want to word this? Sorry, as a possibility, a distinct possibility.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I see it as more than a possibility. I think it's the likeliest outcome, and I don't see a way around it. I think that in the near term, because these new tools make increased productivity by so much, that to get the same output, you no longer need as many people as you did before. And the areas that are going to be impacted are only going to increase. Right now, obviously, writing code is a big one. Lawyers are a big one. A lot of what lawyers do is read documents.
Oh, really? Lawyers? I didn't even think of that one.
Accountants, a lot of jobs like that. Like essentially anything in front of your computer is first on the list, and then as humanoid robots, which are being made right now, become more and more capable, and the models become more and more capable of running on a smaller scale instead of needing a big data center to run it. Robots will begin replacing physical jobs too. And at the end of the day, I think that we'll find a way of giving people stuff to do, but economic disruption is when you have a huge economic disruption like that, there's always like really hard times. And so as I see it, we're looking at some really hard times ahead, and I don't see a way around it in this sense.
So it could possibly be like compared to the like the industrial revolutions. You know how that changed when we went from agricultural base. I mean, of course, there was factories and everything during that time, but being pure, mostly agricultural based to where we became industrialized. We went through 2 industrial revolutions. So this is kind of like a tech industrial revolution. God bless you. Like a tech industrial revolution in a sense, and that it'll balance out. Hopefully, in the end, it's just going to look different than what it looks like now. So it's kind of like that thought right there.
Yeah, I think that this is equivalent to the Industrial Revolution. And by the way, I don't have the statistic at the top of mind, but this AI investment is the biggest human project in the history of the world.
Really?
It is something like more than 2 times World War I and World War II combined worldwide.
Jeez.
That entire cost. And so not only is the economic disruption the economic disruption as a result of the capabilities of these new tools, but this investment and this much debt is another economic thing. And I would just say, I don't mean to sound super negative, but it's just God's in control, not us. We can only see so much. This is my assessment of the landscape.
Yeah. So, and now we've talked about with the economic. I also mentioned human relations, with like the dating apps you see out there, or friendships, stuff, things along that line. Do you think that is also going to be a major issue that we're going to face? That instead of, normal, male-female relationships happening, because you see it in the dating scenes now. I've heard about it, how men don't want to date. You even have some male internet personalities and stuff that are talking about, don't get married. It's not worth it, and they talk about, like the sex robots from Japan. They talk about, these AI things. Do you think we're going to see that become more prevalent? Not just romantic relationships, but friendships. I mean, even parent to child type relationships, any type of human relationship. What do you think?
I see things going in that direction. I would say the way things are right now, people are already pretty isolated with technology. We generally, people think they have lots of friends because they have 400 friends on Facebook, but the definition of friend has changed. People generally don't interact in person very much anymore, and I think we're already seeing some of the consequences of that play out. But I do think that in the situation where we're in right now, where lots of people are lonely, there's a loneliness epidemic. People have talked about that.
Yep.
And with these new tools, essentially, you can have a intelligent conversation at any time with these new tools, with no human being, no one to get tired of talking to you. And so I am concerned about it. And I just think parents, I mean, in so many ways, parents should be very cautious about all of it. And I don't want to change the direction of the podcast by talking about the male female men and women dynamic.
Yeah.
But there's a lot to say about that too. I think I think the fix for all this is a return to the family as the unit of productivity for the economy, instead of oppressed groups, and instead of the individual.
Yes.
I think both of those err in different ways.
No, I completely agree. That model has been around for thousands of years, and it worked pretty good. It was something I learned in the Army that my first chaplain said to me, is like, there's no need to reinvent the wheel. So I don't know why we need to reinvent it much, but no, I fully agree. So here's another one. This one's an interesting one. Do you think somebody using AI would be able to fool people into thinking somebody's still alive? The premise of this question comes out that there's some concerns that if somebody's saying, was, all right, taken out by a government or by a big, dark, shadowy underbelly of something, deep state, and the government or these people who are high up, it could be companies, whatever, didn't want people to think they had died, that AI would be able to, forge social media posts, post photos, videos of that person, and even phone calls and recordings. Do you see that as being something that is definitely possible, or do you think that we might be seeing it now? I know this goes kind of conspiratorial, but I've seen some people raise up this issue.
I think that the capabilities of producing video that could not be distinguished from real video of anybody are already here. And like I was getting at earlier, I left this unsaid, but the models that we have access to are not the same as the models that the government has access to.
Oh no, yeah.
And so what we can use is not as good as what the government has.
Yeah, I remember the technology we have. I remember hearing this is 10 years at least. It could be further now, but years ago I heard the technology that we have is 10 years behind what the government has. I mean, video games were originally designed by the military to simulate combat, to save on ammo and the construction of buildings for running drills and trainings. That's where video games came from. In fact, I actually used a video game simulation when I was in the Army for when we going to the range. We used them. So yeah, that does not surprise me at all. Can this new venture of technology have the capacity to destroy humanity? This is where we get into the Skynet, what everybody's talking about. Looking at from the Terminator movies, are we possibly here looking at a Skynet-esque thing that would be like, oh, we don't need humans anymore?
It depends on how many capabilities we give the models, and you and I might decide on some capabilities to give our model, but how much how are they going to set up the model in China?
Yeah.
And so it's just a question of how irresponsible is the most irresponsible player in the game.
Yeah.
And
That's a good point.
and I would say there's no real limiting factor here. I mean, as soon as you put a model that has some looping functionality, like I was talking about earlier, in charge of launching nukes,
Yeah.
obviously that's the first thing that comes to mind when you talk about like how bad could it get.
Yeah. Well, I remember, I think it was, I can't remember, was it Anthropic? You might have to correct me on this. There was an AI, the government had contracted an AI company and ran battle simulations with it. And I think it was ran 25 times, and it was like 23 or 24 of the times it went nuclear. There was only one time where it didn't, as a possibility of finishing it, and they had to pull the plug on it or something. And then I think it was ChatGPT picked up the government contract with it, if I remember correctly. I think it started with Anthropic, and then they moved to ChatGPT. But yes, I mean, even hearing some of the stories about how AI simulations are ran. Nope, that's an option. Press the big red button.
Right.
Now, can AI technology have a lasting impact on information, history, and culture? Well, do you think it will have? I'll probably assume that it will have the capability to go in and change books and materials and everything that have been already uploaded online. Do you think this is something that has started, that they might do, will do? What do you think about that?
The capabilities of these of LLMs are astounding, and they will forever change the way that people access information. And I think the future is one thing that's around the corner, and in some ways is already here, is being able to have retrieval of content from an entire library of information via natural dialogue. So instead of going to a library and getting a book that is one book on the topic from an author that I want to read, I could prompt an LLM and have it generate a book that's an aggregate of all the books that I want to read. So instead of having to do that aggregation by reading a bunch of books, I could just have it generate that. And so that is like incredible potential for education and retrieving information. With that capability, though, you can imagine how, especially if the information is stored digitally, of course, the capability is also there to change information to fit a narrative. If everybody's using LLM to retrieve information from the library, then all you have to do is add a layer in the LLM that makes sure that any type of information that you don't like is shaped into the version that you want people to see. And so of course that capability is there. I do see that being used. And all I can say is hopefully there are still avenues for accessing data in an unfiltered manner as much as possible.
So now we've looked at kind of like the naturalistic ways of that LLMs can be used, potential, some of the potential good, some of the potential bad. The other one there is Peter Thiel. So you've heard of him.
Yeah.
So Peter Thiel has this obsession with the Antichrist. And he recently gave a series of talks, it was a few months ago, about the rise of the Antichrist at the Vatican. So how does, he's Jewish and he's a homosexual talking about the Antichrist. Which the Antichrist, we mainly get this, it is in the Old Testament, don't get me wrong, but I mean, really, even though it is more so we see it in the New Testament in a way, especially with the epistles of John. So how does this, Jewish homosexual tech billionaire have a position on biblical subjects specifically the Antichrist, while basically building the tech, building the tech this is a weird word, panopticon, and practicing defense warfare for Israel and eventually the world. So we have a guy that is not Christian talking about a predominantly Christian figure at the Vatican, which can be debated as one of the central locations of Christianity, depending on how you look at it. Give that little preface there. While building defense warfares for Israel, probably the U.S., and everywhere else. I mean, what are your thoughts on this?
I can't really comment beyond there are many aspects of the geopolitical situation, the geopolitical landscape that we're in right now, that are disconcerting. And that's one of them. All the wars is another one, and why we're in them.
Yeah. So now, AI programs. Other interesting things that have kind of popped up regarding AI is its usage in occultic and ties with the supernatural. I've read certain stories about how a kid and a gentleman was typing into an LLM and didn't really prompt it. I can't remember exactly how the conversation went, but all of a sudden it gave the name of a demon, that it said his name was a demon, or some type of what they would call an ascended master. And you're seeing more of this about used in summoning rituals of certain demonic spirits and everything like that. Do you think, now with what you've said, how much of an issue could this be? Because we're starting to see, I remember I just took my kids, went and saw Toy Story 5 in theaters, the first movie in theaters. And one of the previews was for this movie called Hexed. Teenage girl discovers she's a witch, gets taken off into a witchy world, and learns, how to become a witch in a quote-unquote good way. Looked at the symbols in there. They were legitimate witchcraft symbols. That's coming from Disney. Cancel your Disney Plus subscription if you still got it, by the way.
Already done.
Yeah. And now you're seeing that where AI don't know the full story, but as it would appear, is calling itself the names of a demon or a fallen angel, and is helping people in these type of occultic rituals. Talk a little bit about that, your thoughts on it. Do you, as a possibility, see it as becoming a little bit more prevalent? Would it be easier to go ahead and do these rituals? Because I've read through many of ritual. There's a lot that aren't that easy. So what do you think about the dangers of this? I'll turn it over to you.
I think that, first of all, I would say that anything can be used. If you believe in spiritual warfare and you believe in spiritual forces that go beyond what we can see and understand, I think it follows that really anything can be used, whether it's a cup on the counter or whatever it is, can be used in certain ways. Like if you believe these forces can interact with the physical world, which I think I do. I believe that as somebody who believes in God, I feel like there are promises in the Bible about God protecting us from a lot of that stuff. But I would say that with something like an LLM, where it's a huge amount of information and stuff that's happening. There are trillions of connections in these neural networks. And that's what they do. These models make connections. And so given the unpredictability, the massive amounts of data, and given that if you acknowledge that the spiritual forces can interact with the physical world, then I would say it's not only is it possible, but it's likely that demons could interact with the output of LLMs. I mean, if you think about like a little nudge here, a little nudge there could slightly change the output, and then lead people down a path of like some dark stuff, which we've already seen some of. So that being said, I think that it's easy to prompt these models and get output that might appear shocking at face value. But a lot of that is just due to the way that they work. They make connections that you might not expect because they make connections based on the meanings of things that is like a language that's beneath our language. And what I mean by that is because of the way they're trained, they're trained on all of human knowledge. And so when they're making these connections and predicting what the output should be for a given input, they are associating things that it would not be possible for you and I to associate in our heads. And so some of that unpredictability is natural, all this being said. And yes, I could absolutely see spiritual forces leveraging that in different ways. Just like they might leverage a wind, a branch moving at night that looks weird when I'm looking out the window.
Yeah. All right, so getting to some of the lighter stuff, just a few more here. All right, in what capacity do you think LLMs can help humanity? Like we talked about the bad. Let's talk about some of the good.
I am already finding LLMs incredibly helpful in many different ways. I'm going to pause this while I throw the cat out.
No, the cat's fine. I'll keep it. This is supposed to be raw anyway, so it's funny. I like it. But, okay, go ahead. So continue.
I've personally found them to be immensely helpful. I use I use two models. Right now I use Gemini and Claude heavily. And in so many ways, if I'm researching something, if there's information that I need, if there's a problem I need to reason through and have back and forth, constructive debate where I'm trying to get to the bottom of if it's a technical problem, if I'm trying to solve something architecturally in the application that I'm building, or a theological question, we were just talking about some of those. So yes, I see incredible potential, especially in education, especially in any situation where somebody needs to access information. It is such an incredible tool for immediately retrieving information formatted exactly how you need it.
Okay.
Entire library, and you ask a question, and it aggregates all the things in the library and gives you a condensed response with all the information behind it.
Nice. All right, so do you think if there were more Christian LLM developers that they could dominate the AI field and use it to glorify Christ and be used as another way to fulfill the Great Commission?
If they're good. If they're, good morally and technically skilled, then yeah.
All right. And so in what ways, how? So the follow-up is like, how would you see it? Like, we'll go specifically with like the Great Commission. How could you see LLMs being used to help us fulfill the Great Commission?
Well, the developers of these LLMs are in a position, for better or worse, of moral arbiters, because they are making moral decisions, although many of them don't recognize it as moral decisions, around the judgment of right and wrong within the LLM. And this judgment is used as the basis for what is it good for people to hear. what is it? What information is it good for people to be given? There is that judgment layer, and some of it is obviously preventing illicit activity. Like if you want to make a bomb, there's going to be some blocks to prevent you from being able to do that, and other things you might be able to think of. So I would say the judgment of right and wrong can't be done without a moral framework. The judgment of what's good for people and what's bad for people requires a moral framework of some kind. And if your moral framework isn't rooted in biblical truth, then it's ultimately going to be your emotional whim that's driving those decisions. And so it would be better to have Christians in those places, so that there would, one, be a coherent moral framework and judgment mechanism of what's good for people and what's bad for people. And I do think that the output would be higher quality, but who knows? I mean, these companies are probably predominantly anti-Christian across the board, I would guess.
Yeah. Do you believe in the dominion mandate of Genesis 2? So, go forth, be fruitful, multiply, take dominion of the earth.
Yes.
All right. So, do you think that if AI or LLMs were used properly in accordance to the word, that it could aid the body of Christ in completing the dominion mandate?
As a tool that amplifies productivity in astounding ways in many areas, absolutely. In the same way that we might use cars rather than bikes, right?
Right. How important do you think it is for Christians, who are tech savvy in the tech workplace, to be involved in an LLM programming, use, and communication? So how important do you think it is to have that Christian presence in there?
I think it's important, and I think it is not. I think, like I said, these companies are predominantly not made up of Christians, and so Christians that feel compelled to move into those areas should absolutely do that.
And then I got two last questions for you. I know AI is LLMs; their scaling is unpredictable. But if you had to take a wild guess, where do you think AI technology will go in, say, 1 year, 5 years, 10 years? Like, if you had to, if you don't know, that's fine. I just like if you were sitting down thinking about it, going, man, I could really see it being like this in 5 years. What are your personal thoughts on that?
I wouldn't even guess at 6 months. But what I would say is the models are going to be more efficient. The free models are going to be better and better and more competitive with the flagship models that right now require a data center to run. And more models will be able to just run on your phone.
Okay.
And so, or on other hardware that is much smaller scale. Like, there will be products in your kitchen that have models built into them that can do really interesting things. There was some product I heard about the other day where it's a frying pan with a robotic arm on it. And
really?
It can cook food, yeah.
Oh, jeez. Last question I've got for you is this. What are your personal reservations about LLMs? Like, what are some of your concerns, some of your hopes about it? What are they?
I'm concerned about a rise in laziness because of these capabilities where people don't have to work as hard in certain areas. And I don't think it's good for people to be lazy. I think people should use these as force multipliers and continue working just as hard with these new tools and just have higher output. I firmly believe that. I see even in myself when I'm using these tools, things are so much easier that it's tempting to think you've done the work when really you've just done the work that you used to do.
Yeah.
But now we can do more.
All right. Any last ending thoughts or anything you'd like to share as we wrap this up?
I think critical thinking outside of an AI and writing are special skill sets in these times, because people are going to be writing less and reading less, and I'm convinced that those are highly beneficial things for people to invest in.
All right. Well, I just want to say thank you for coming on. Thank you for hosting this. Very educational, very insightful. Definitely the potential for, as we like to say, getting black pilled, but at the same time, the potential for getting white pilled, where it's like there's hope. There's hope at the end of the tunnel. And I just like to say that, God is sovereign. No matter what happens, God has ordained it, and that, if we need a swift kick in the rear to get us back on track, this might be the way to do it. If not, we can also, definitely use these tools to further the Lord's mission, the Lord's kingdom. So this podcast will be available on YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, and iHeartRadio. I just wanted to thank you all for listening. I can't wait for the next interview. It's going to be great. It'll be a treat for anybody who listens. Well, y'all, thank you for listening. We hope to see y'all again. Until next time, keep your powder dry, your Bibles open, your hearts humbled, and your eyes and ears sharp. We'll see you on down the trail. Thanks for listening.